Washington got some bad news on Monday. Defensive tackle Jayvon Parker is done for the year.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He's site editor with Athlon Sports' Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen today, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Lars, we got a lot of tough things to talk about on today's show. Defensive line injuries to Jayvon Parker, especially, and Zach Durfee a little bit as well. They're coming at the worst time. So we're going to get to that. We're going to talk about what the defensive line is going to look like going forward in the wake of this news, because the big news, and we'll get to, as I said, we'll get to Zach Durfee, who Jedd Fisch said is dealing with a toe injury, which might keep him out this week, and we'll see what that looks like. But Jayvon Parker, who was in the midst of a true breakout season. He just looked absolutely fantastic in the Steve Belichick scheme. He is done for the season with a torn Achilles.
Yeah, that one. And it's just so deflating, because if you also think about what Jayvon had to go through just to get to the season, if you the fall camp, the injury that he had in the spring, basically didn't do much of anything in fall camp, misses the Weber State game. And actually somebody asked, does he have a medical redshirt? Well, he's only played 4 games this year. Right. So he's got one if he needs it. It's actually kind of perfectly timed out that way. And I know I'm not saying Jedd or the staff did that in any way, but there is kind of a hopeful optimism that, he gets an extra year for this, because to your point, this was supposed to be his year. He finally had all the old guys out of the way. And it's not the old guys, but just this was his first year to do something. And when he was coming into this, he's like, okay, he's going to have a slow start. But, man, when he came in, he really made an impact. And I think that was what we had both saw back in the spring when he was healthy, and what we both knew he could do. Like, that was the thing. It's like, hey, once you get Jayvon back, you're good. Once you get Jayvon, you're good. And now it's, okay, now you're going to have Bryce. Now you're going to have probably Elinneus Davis. There's some other guys in there. Omar Khan might have to take a step up now. Who knows? But there's enough guys in that room to make it work. But really, this basically just puts it on Elinneus. I think Elinneus and Bryce are going to be the 2 guys, and we'll get more to it. But, yeah, because I asked you about which play it was, and it was the one right before the Samuel Brown touchdown, which is just kind of even more deflating, because, that ended up sealing the game for the most part. And, and it wasn't on Jayvon. It wasn't like Jayvon did anything wrong. But, man, you just kind of have to take a step back and think about those brothers. Like, man, they have been through so much. Like that. Their entire college path should be a 30 for 30, because the way they were found, miracle. The way they both came together, even more of a miracle, given that no other school offered both of them. The coach that offered them leaves. The head coach goes to another school. And now you got to start all over. And, by the way, Armand's out for the season. Now Jayvon's out for the season. Well, I think Armand's out for the season, right?
Yeah, Armand's out for the year. Yes, that's correct.
That's what. So I was like,
No, you're absolutely right, because that's what I wanted to talk about. Is I think about this in terms of both of them, where Jedd Fisch took a minute to talk about both Armand and Jayvon, where it's a really great story, Lars, as you said. And I've really enjoyed following both their careers and seeing, Jayvon have to burn his red shirt while Armand recovered from an injury. You've always and it's been, I want to say, one of the biggest mysteries of just Husky fandom as a whole for the last 3 years is watching both of these guys, because we knew coming out of high school, it's, there's some real talent here. Let's see what this looks like, especially if it's super cool. Twin brothers playing the same position, playing next to each other, getting to play together. That's awesome. That's exactly it's just a fun story that everyone wants to root for. And we haven't seen it yet. And that sucks. And as Jedd Fisch said, it's a freak injury. Like, that's the whole thing where, you might say, this, like, I want to be, cautious about his future now, or is he injury prone? No, it's not that. These things happen. It happens to football players. These freak injuries happen, and it sucks, and it's part of the game, and you can't do anything to change it. But one of I want to take, a second here, just talk about the positive side of things, where just the long term, where it's really nice to see the way medical science has advanced and looking forward, looking at what his career could be, where Jedd Fisch said, yeah, we're hoping he might be ready for spring ball. I think that's still maybe a little optimistic. But, we've seen Alfonso Tuputala have a torn Achilles. We saw him bounce back from that and still play really well. He's been phenomenal this season. We've seen torn Achilles. A torn Achilles is not the death sentence it once was to a football player's career. So that's a huge positive. And I think that that's something that we can really just look at coming into 2025 with Jayvon, hopefully with Armand as well, where that's a different injury. But coming into next season, that we might be able to see both of them at full strength is something that I'm really going to hang my hat on and say I'm excited to watch both those two guys. But Lars, we need to spend a minute talking about Zach Durfee as well, where he only played 13 snaps, because we're going to get back to Jayvon. But Zach Durfee only played 13 snaps in the last game against Rutgers, and then all of a sudden he was gone. Jedd Fisch didn't necessarily offer a huge update on him in the post game. Seemed like it was one of those things where he wanted to get back, do some more testing, see what it looked like. And Jedd said that he's dealing with a toe injury and said that he's hopeful Zach will be able to play this week, but it's going to take a big effort from the training staff in order for him to do that. And it sounds like I don't want to do too much speculating here, but it sounds like it might be a turf toe sort of thing, just from the way he was describing the injury, where he said, yeah, he's got to feel comfortable planting and cutting off that foot. So that's kind of what leads me to believe that. That's all I'm going to say on the matter in terms of the injury itself. But when I look at that, I really hope that he's going to be a guy that's going to be able to play this week as well, because talking about, breakout seasons, Zach has been awesome this year when he's played. And, early on in that game, he was phenomenal in terms of stopping the run.
Exactly. And I think that's the other side of the equation is, especially coming into the game against Michigan, you don't have to get after the passer, but you need as many guys as you can chasing down guys on the edge, or, guys at the middle that maybe break through and gang tackles. And I think, the thing with Zach is, I think if you could even just get him to 15 snaps, I think if that, again, I'm not saying push him to an injury if he's not able to play, but because I agree with your assessment where you just kind of walk through what the injury is and kind of do some deductive reasoning there. I would imagine he plays, and I think that's the other thing of the strength staff. Jedd's given a lot of praise to the strength staff. That's the other side of this equation. And so they've done it. If there's a chance that if he's questionable, I can see him being questionable and playing maybe the third 10 to 15 snaps.
Sure,
that's fine. And if you think about it, then you got the Iowa game and then you got the bye week. So you really only got 2 more weeks left to figure out what you need to do to get to a bye week. And I think if you can get Durfee to Iowa and get him another week, that'll be better.
I certainly agree with you there. And I think it's one of the nice things about having such a deep rotation at the position is really nice, where we saw Deshaun Lynch play really well. We saw Voit Tanufi play really well. I think he's having the best season of his career. And something our buddy Ben Glassmeyer wrote about over on Huskies Wire is Voit has been in the middle of a breakout season. Voit looked tremendous defending the run against Rutgers, where that's what we want to get into in terms of that. But I just want to spend another second talking about it, because you're deeper, Washington is deeper than a lot of people seem to think at both these positions. And if Zach is also unable to play this week, that's also a really, really big loss, just like Jayvon. But I feel really confident in the defensive line that Jason Kafusi and Steve Belichick and this coaching staff have built. And Lars, with that being said, let's get there, because it really is a talented group. Right after a message from our friends over at Roy, it's time to highlight our Roy Player of the Week. Roy is a new platform that lets fans make contributions directly to their favorite athletes. Download Roy for iOS or Android, enter referral code LOCKEDON. You'll automatically be entered into a sweepstakes to win $5,000 cash. No purchase necessary, void where prohibited. This week we selected Denzel Boston because he was just tremendous against Rutgers. 6 catches, 125 yards, 2 touchdowns, including that 51-yarder catch and run. He is turning into the receiver that we said he would at the beginning of the year. He's looked absolutely tremendous. He's been one of the best receivers in the Big Ten, and that's why we are giving Denzel Boston $100 on Roy. If you were impressed as we were with his performance on Saturday, you can show him some love too. Just hop on Roy and throw in a few bucks. If everyone pitches in just $10, it adds up fast for Denzel. Now you have the chance to show your appreciation for Denzel Boston and his standout performance this week, as well as what he'll continue to bring to the program. Get off the sidelines and into the NIL game with Roy. So Lars, we wanted to talk about the defensive line's depth, and this is a full defensive line show. I love this. I love talking defensive line. Where looking at Michigan, just in the circumstances that Washington's now in, if both of these guys are out, what does this defensive line look like?
I got a question for you. Why has Logan Sagapolu not played more?
I feel like they're still trying to work him into the position where even in the press conference on Monday, Jedd had kind of was like, oh yeah, we should get Bryce Butler back this week, which will be really good. I've got a lot that I want to talk about with Bryce Butler in a minute. He said, I want to see Jacob Bandish step up. Elinneus, he didn't name Elinneus Davis, but it's one of those things where we know that he's somebody who's played really well and now needs to take a bigger role. And then he's kind of like, oh yeah, and Logan Sagapolu, we want to see more out of him. It feels like they're still working him into the position. Which it's one of those things where if he was here for spring ball, I feel like this would be a different conversation. Because it's kind of like, we haven't seen we've seen Jaden Wayne. We haven't seen nearly as much as I think some fans want to see from him, where it's all right. He's still getting worked into things in certain ways where I think we might see him on the interior a little bit more as well. But I think that's what it is. It's just not being here for spring ball has kind of put him behind the 8 ball a little bit.
Yeah, Jaden Wayne has twice as many snaps between the gaps as Logan Sagapolu does. That's why I kind of was curious. But Jaden Wayne's an edge rusher, and he's got twice as many snaps up the middle as Logan does. But I think to your point, you're talking about Bryce Butler. Jacob Lane's another guy. Voight Tanupi's another guy you can play in multiple positions. And I think it's the versatility of this defensive front that offsets a lot more of the injuries than necessarily straight up a body-for-body switch. Because, like Voight's a guy where, and Steve mentioned it, where is he Jayvon Parker? Is he a 6'3", 310 guy? No. But he's got the tenacity to become that guy and make an impact like that guy. So it's a matter of, can you find the right combination? And to me, I think it's probably going to be Elinneus more than anything. And obviously Bryce, I'm with you on Bryce. I'm absolutely with you on Bryce. But I think given that, he missed the past couple of games, not due to injury, but just getting back in the swing of things, Elinneus is a guy I probably would expect more out of in the first game. But as the season goes along, I think Bryce will definitely be a guy.
So hopefully Bryce can play as much as possible this week. And here's why. I think Bryce is the perfect counter to what Michigan wants to do, where they are very big on just this downhill running attack. As we said about Alex Orji on the Monday show, he has doing some quick math here, 120 passing yards over his last 2 games. So they're not asking him to throw the ball very much. There's going to be a whole lot of Donovan Edwards. And I have been so impressed with Bryce Butler when he's on the field. Well, we won't go into the reasons that he hasn't played so far. But when I watch him, I just say that guy has been elite in terms of penetration against the run. Watching him shoot gaps and just get vertical and get through just even the smallest gaps in offensive lines is so much fun to watch. And I think that we're going to see a lot of big, heavy fronts against Michigan, who's going to want to do the exact same thing and run the ball downhill a lot. And I think Bryce is one of those guys where he might be able to slide in and take a lot of those snaps that Jayvon was in and so disruptive on. So he's a guy that I really think can be just a huge difference maker if he turns into just the player he showed he can be in the first couple of weeks.
I'm with you, although I think I can't disagree with anything you said. I think the key here is there's 2 players. It's not just one, because Bryce is a good guy to have in that mix as well. But when you add, it's the combination of him and Elinneus. And I think that's the key for Washington, where you're not relying on one or the other. Now, Bryce Butler's the junior who's got more experience. It's coming from JUCO. Elinneus is still in his first season, right? Redshirt freshman and all that. But look at the PFF grades. Jayvon Parker was the highest graded run defender, 85.8. Big loss. Elinneus Davis, 81.4. Right there. Yeah. And so, and then you also look at Kamori and there's a few other guys in that mix. But to me, that's why Elinneus is, when Elinneus showed me exactly what Bryce has showed you. And I'm not saying I haven't seen it from Bryce, but just what we've seen, more recently than not from Elinneus is this is a guy that can do it. Now, he's only played 3 games as well, so you have to wonder, well, is it depth? Is it injury? Is it whatever?
I think it's depth.
And I think it's more so depth. But that's why you have that depth, because you don't need to play all these guys, but yet when you do need to play them, you already have them there and you're not in a short position, because that's the issue. And I think I can honestly see both those guys playing together at a 5-man front.
Oh, absolutely. And that's one of the things that I think is it sucks the most with the Jayvon loss because he'd be right in the middle of that, where I'd love to see those three guys together. Where that's something when I think about the future of this defensive line, that's what it looks like right now. Where, you think about the guys in the 25 class, you think about Omar Khan, who looks like a really good run stopper. But you look at all these guys and you look at what this defensive front looks like, and that could be the future right there. So it sucks that you don't get to see that. I want to kind of switch gears here and talk about the edge position because I have similar questions about, let's, for the next couple of minutes, operate under the assumption that Zach Durfee does not play this week. And I'm really curious what that looks like. I think that Voy slides in and takes that starting spot. I think that we don't necessarily see as much Isaiah Ward, who's been good against the run, but we've seen other guys be a lot better. And I think Deshaun Lynch gets a heavier workload. I think Jaden Wayne gets a heavier workload. And I also think maybe we see a lot more Jacob Lane. And I think that might end up being the top 4 against a Michigan team that, like we said, likes to run the ball a lot. And I'm comfortable with that. Do I love it as much as I would with, obviously a Zach Durfee in there? No, but I don't think it's as big of a fall off as some people might think. So when I look at this defensive front as a whole, I've been impressed with this talent all year. We've seen that they've shown the ability to depth the quarterback, the ability to stop the run. And Lars, as you pointed out a little bit earlier, that play, the Samuel Brown touchdown run happened immediately after Jayvon Parker went out. So it just kind of highlights that, that wasn't necessarily great. We know Bryce Butler didn't play in that game either, and that there's still problems and it's not perfect, but it's not necessarily a huge problem either.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, not to bust your bubbles, but Isaiah Ward is definitely going to play a significant role, but with or without.
Oh, I'm sure he would. Yeah.
And if Durfee's out, he's absolutely going to play a role. But looking at the snap count, breakdown, you got, it's Ward, it's Lynch, and then Kamori House is also right there. So, and you got Lance Holtzclaw. There's plenty of guys, I think. Now, Lance is more of a speed rusher. Not that he can't play the run, but I think of the two, I think we're taking Jacob Lane in that regard. But you have the bodies, and I think that's the thing. And you might, line up Holtzclaw on one side and Ward on the other, or Lane on the other. And,
sure,
there's a number of ways to make it work. The thing is, I mean, this is what the kind of beauty of Michigan. There's no way they beat you in the passing game. There's no way that, and I say that with all due respect, but there's just no way. So if there was ever a game to sell out on the run, like the Northwestern game, it's this one. Stack the box, literally 8 guys in the box, forced to one-on-ones outside. And by the way, you can have Kamori House as a split end, outside rusher who could drop back. You have athletes on this defense, and Alfonso Tuputala is another one. Here's a crazy stat. Alfonso Tuputala leads UW edge rushers in outside alignment.
Yeah, that doesn't. I can't
by 37 snaps.
Okay, that part's crazy. That part is wild, but I can't say I'm shocked that he leads it because they've done a really good job of utilizing him out there. And that's a really, I'm so glad you brought that up because that's a really big part of it. He's not the only one we've seen do that. We've seen Kamori do that. We've seen Carson do it at times too, where, it's one thing we haven't talked about on the show yet. And we're probably not going to spend a whole bunch of time on it, where not having Brian Parham for the rest of the season with his decision is like, it certainly doesn't help things, where you certainly like to have as many linebackers as possible in a game like this. But at the same point, when you have so many talented linebackers like Carson, like Kamori, like Alfonso that can play inside, play outside, line up all over the formation, you find ways to make it work. And Lars, you said it perfectly. Against this Michigan team where we know how they want to beat you, you can find a way to counteract that.
Oh, you absolutely can. I mean, okay, I'll give my 30-second spiel on Parham. I think he made the right decision. I don't know, honestly, why he transferred to Washington in the first place. If I'm Parham, this is no shot at him, but if I'm looking at that room, Zoe, Carson, Drew, Ward, there's 4 or 5 guys right off the bat that are in my eligibility class or around that age. And I'm coming in the summer like that. If you came in the spring, I would expect, you'd be a significant contributor. When you come in over the summer, it's like, eh.
Well, he came in for the spring.
And that's actually more to the point. If you came into the spring, why did you not make more of an impact? And he was a guy who seemed like a good body, but not a body that was going to move one way or the other.
I certainly get what you're saying there. I know we don't need to spend too much time on it, but it just plays into the linebacker point of now. I'm curious to see what the rotation looks like there, and with some of these injuries up front, where teams are certainly they've shown that they're more capable to run the ball against this Husky defense and throw on them. So what is that going to look like if one of these other guys goes down? Who is it that's going to step up? Is it Hayden Moore? Is it Anthony Ward? Is it Devin Bryant? Where I'm really curious about that, and that's something that we're going to certainly have to keep an eye on going forward. But again, I'm still confident that this defensive line is going to be good enough to get the job done. I think that these injuries keep it away from the elite category that we saw it be in the first couple of weeks. But it's certainly not going to be all of a sudden, this is now a terrible defensive line that has so many holes and that we're worried about. There's still questions, but not huge ones. And Lars, it sucks that these injuries happen now because they really did come at the worst possible time. Which we'll get to right after a message from our friends over at FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. And I got to go back to the well. I know Josh Allen didn't necessarily play very well on Sunday Night Football against the Baltimore Ravens. Shout out to Roger Rosengarten, who made his first career start in that game. But I still love his MVP odds over on FanDuel. And Jaden Daniels for Rookie of the Year. He continues to just look like that guy. I've been so impressed with everything he's been able to put together. He's got some nice odds right now. You should go check those out over on FanDuel and maybe throw a couple bucks on each. So Lars, these defensive line injuries really came at the worst possible time. There's never a good time for injuries, but when we look at the next 2 weeks, especially with Michigan and then Iowa, these are two teams who don't, and I feel like you can say this is the majority of the Big Ten, they don't necessarily scare you through the air. These are teams that love to line up and run the ball down your throat. And these injuries make it so that Washington's a little more susceptible to that, which is concerning, but it's just, it really, I can't stop using this phrase, but I feel like that's just the best way to put it, because especially when you think about these kids and the stories that they've had individually to get to Washington, it really sucks.
Yeah, it's the worst time, but in a way, it's almost the best time. And I want to preface it by saying the injuries that have happened, again, never root for injuries, never want them to happen, but Jayvon out for the season, it's a clean and clear, what that one is. Durfee should be back, it's a week-to-week sort of thing. Like the Jayvon one is like brutal because it's like, okay, dang, out for the season and the brother situation and all that. But the glass half full is you look at what he can do in 2 years, next year, next fall, and
sure.
26. You could actually have 2 years of the Parker brothers playing next to each other at full health.
Sure.
Like in a way, it actually kind of does time out perfectly because by this point next season, they should both be healthy, running start into fall camp for both Armon and Jayvon. But everything else kind of just, it's almost like a Big Ten injury. It's like, it's just everything is going to test you. Every week is going to be a test, and you have to be up for it. And that's why we always talk about you have to recruit the trenches so well, because you need 2, 3, 4 different lines. Almost like, I forgot who mentioned this, but it's almost like a hockey line where it's like, you have your first line, your second line, your third line. And now you're not Georgia, you're not Alabama, you're not expecting the first, line 2, 3, and 4 to have the same exact impact as line 1. But Jason Kavusi's done a pretty good job with this line. Now, has it been great? No. Have they gotten exposed a couple of times? Sure. But I think the run defense has been probably better than it's been in the past 3 years. And I say that knowing how good and bad it's been, both this year and in the past. But you see Elinneus, that's a guy. Omar Khan, probably in 18 months, the next year, is a guy. And I hate using that phrase because there's literally no football acumen behind it. But you just know, okay, with this coaching staff, with this scheme, you're going to find guys that can get in there. But at the same point, which is why I also mentioned the bye week, you only have 2 weeks until the bye. And then now, granted, you got Indiana coming out of the bye, which is going to be more of a bar than we thought it was. But with that being said, you can manage it to where if you lose Jayvon, let's say week 1, and all these injuries happen earlier in the season, it almost sets it back because it seems like an uphill climb where you're still 3-2, should be 5-0, but you're 3-2, so you're still ahead of the sticks. If we're using a football term, stay ahead of the sticks. That's the key for this coaching staff in every possible regard, whether it's injuries, on field, whatever. Stay in front of the sticks, whether it's 1 yard in front of the sticks, a half a yard in front of the sticks, it doesn't matter. And right now, the bodies in that room are giving them the ability to do that.
Yes. And I feel like you also, because the bodies for sure, but you also give a credit to this coaching staff and Steve Belichick especially, where this scheme has just unlocked them like we haven't seen done in previous years, where, it's a lot of different players up front. Sebastian Valdez obviously wasn't here last year. Jacob Bandis certainly was, and like Elinneus Davis, we didn't expect him to play a role last year at all anyway. But Jayvon is one where I look at that and I just say, he was so limited last year and there was no reason for him to be. Where, you look at all the seniors, the upperclassmen in front of him. Tooley played so well. MJ Ale was really good in spurts. Fatui Tuitele, when he was healthy, was certainly a guy that could be disruptive. But it just felt like you were never really unlocking Jayvon the way that he could have been. And that was one of the really exciting things about him and his story this year, was it was, okay, here we go. We can, we've seen what this guy is in terms of a talent for the last 2 years. Now let's see him fully unleashed with a really good defensive scheme. And we finally got a chance to see that, which is one of the things that I really stick on. But you're right. I want to go back to what you're saying about this being just a Big Ten challenge. And I like that. And that's just like, it sucks to have to talk about it in this light, but that's what it is. It's all right. We've seen Washington fail a couple of Big Ten tests really early. One of them wasn't even a Big Ten test. It was a Pac-2 test. And seeing that happen was not great either. And now it's just a matter of, all right, these are all the obstacles that have already been thrown your way this season. Here's another one. I'm curious to see what the coaching staff does going forward, because we've seen them scheme for a game without Zach Durfee, and that game looked really good. We've seen them scheme for a game without Jayvon Parker. That game looked really good. They still found a way to get it done and make it happen. Granted, it's against lesser opponents, not Michigan, but we've seen it happen. So I want to say that I have faith in this coaching staff to make that part of it work. But I feel like some of the other things we've seen makes me a little bit more reserved in that statement.
Which is understandable. And I think, and you're saying that because when you see the run, get beat, and there's a few times where the run fits haven't been as perfect.
Yeah.
But I think if you look at it in totality, it's certainly better than what they've had. Like, it's absolutely without night and day better than what they've had. And I think, getting back to when we look at the guys in that room, it's, you're looking at a lot more unproven guys. I will say, I think, not to be tongue in cheek about this, but it's kind of cool that now Jayvon will get to come back for sure next season with Armand. I think that answers that question. But when you look at this season, you have so many guys that now can fill that Jayvon role moving forward. I think Elinneus is that guy. I think Elinneus could be that next Jayvon Parker where, hey, Jayvon had to play a bunch as a freshman because, we had injuries or just burned his red shirt or whatever. Obviously, this isn't his red shirt. This isn't his true freshman season. It's his red shirt freshman season. But it gives him a running start for next year to pair with Jayvon because Seabass is gone. Bandis is gone. Voy is gone. A lot of those guys are gone next year.
Right.
So this is a perfect opportunity for Elinneus to play next to Bryce, to play, Zoe's gone, but after the season, Zoe's gone. But play with some of these veteran guys who will or will not be back next season and really kind of just cement himself and say, hey, look, obviously it sucks that Jayvon's not with me. I would love it if Jayvon was my D-tackle teammate. But now I'm going to set the tone so next year when those guys are healthy, we can all just play off of each other. And you hate to have to look at it in that light where, again, everything is about the season. This season is you're not throwing out the season. It's like, all right, well, we lost Jayvon, we're done.
Right.
Even if Will Rogers goes down, and again, I'm not rooting for it, but even if Will went out for this, you still have Jamon. You still got to play the games. You're not just tapping out on the season, but it becomes a different approach. And so I think this defense will still be fine, but it's really when you're trying to look at those guys, it's going to be these guys are making their future claims now is what they're doing.
I like that approach a lot, actually, because that's what it is, right? Where that was part of what this season was always supposed to be, where, we had the record at 8-4, where it's, they're going to be able to beat some of the, we assumed that they'd be able to beat some of these teams, be able to take this step forward and still show, hey, this is a really, really solid program that is not just solid for right now in terms of some of the seniors that are contributing. As you said, Voy, Carson, Tupatala, Sebastian Valdez, some of these guys, and Will Rogers being another one that you mentioned, where with all these guys that are contributing, right now that are done after this season, but it's also mixing in some of these younger guys like Jayvon, like, Bryce Butler, like Elinneus Davis. So I certainly agree with that. Now it's just, like the only comparison that I feel fits here is kind of like in a video game in a certain sense, where for anybody who's played College Football 25's franchise mode, it's like, all right, I'm up by it, and it's not the same case, but I'm up by a couple scores. I want to play this entire second half with all my young guys to see what I have here. Where that's, in essence, what some of this is, where you're not up by a couple scores, but you want to put a lot of these guys out there and see what it looks like. And just see, all right, this is what it's going to look like coming into 2025. And we're going to have a lot of new pieces that we're excited about then. And hopefully it all comes together at the right time. It's just, with a couple of really tough opponents up next on the slate, it's not going to be easy at all. And there certainly is going to be some growing pains moving forward. And Lars, that being said, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you all every day for tuning in. We really do appreciate the support. And thank you so much for making Locked On Huskies your first listen today. Now for your second listen, find Locked On College Football. From NIL deals, never-ending conference realignment rumors, our guy Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron. You can find the link to Locked On College Football down in the description below, on YouTube, wherever else you get your podcasts. And like we said, thank you so much for tuning in, and make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, we're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So make sure you click that like button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new video. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comments section. And if you're audio only, please leave us a 5-star review. It does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Wednesday.